Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for being our keynote. You gave a really thought-provoking conversation with our audience. I appreciate that. Absolutely. And one of the things that you talked about that just really struck me was this idea of binary thinking. Can you speak a little bit more to that and how that could be a challenge in the realm of AI?
For sure. The concept of binary thinking to me has been omnipresent as long as new innovations and new technologies have been welcomed into, or not welcomed into, any industry. And so currently, I think of the binary approach to artificial intelligence as either a blanket assumption of it's good or it's bad, and there's no in between. A lot of the news coverage and podcasting and television stations that I see covering it have very incendiary titles, and it's either one of two. It's on one side of the equation or on the other side of the equation. And if something goes from bad to good or goes from good to bad, it still is very black or white. And having now covered and worked in ed tech for more than 12 years in education, I can tell you it's anything but. And artificial intelligence and the implementation of large language models and technology development is just the same thing. So I think that one of the most exciting practices I've seen to come out of some of the classrooms and some of the folks that I know that are educators is the opportunity to co-create new acceptable use policies. That's something that really gets me excited because it's very important when we have new things coming into the classroom. And it really does behoove us to bring in the student voice as much as the educator or practitioner voice.
Well, and acceptable use policies can be used to kind of combat some of the fears that are out there, right? They provide a little bit of guidelines. What are some of the good examples that you're starting to see?
So I would call out the one that I referenced in my keynote, which is a colleague of mine, Kyle Ali, who's a professor at Villanova, an adjunct professor. He worked with his graduate students to create an acceptable use policy that essentially allowed for use of the ChatGPT chatbot technology, which is just a small part of AI, but a part of AI, to use it within reason. So what they did was they spoke as a group in the first class of spring semester for about 45 minutes and talked about the different use cases they could use it for in a class that has a lot of writing, a lot of essay prompts, things like that. And then Kyle went on LinkedIn and solicited a lot of ideas from teachers and students and put together a list of basically 10 guidelines for generative AI use. And it included things like, you're allowed to use a chatbot to help understand complicated concepts. So maybe you've talked about, the idea of organizational change, and you want to understand some of the different organizational structures that you learned about in class, but you'd like to deliver it in, a language that's more palatable to you. Some other use cases could be putting in an argument and getting the AI chatbot's response to your argument to see, potential other naysayer approaches that you may want to think about the argument against. So essentially, this list of 10 was meant to also be an iterative form, because that was, at the time, in spring 2023, what the students and Kyle put together, but they will change it every year as artificial intelligence technology gets more sophisticated, but also as new use cases present themselves.
In your role, you get to talk to a lot of different districts, a lot of different places. What are some of the best things that you're seeing in terms of the use of AI right now in education?
So I will say I think that I'm really excited about utilizing AI in educating students about how to address existing issues. Climate change is a prime example. So, I do work for Google, and Google recently released this platform called Flood Hub, which is a AI-based tool that uses predictive analytics to sense where flooding is taking place. To me, in a classroom with a group of students who are learning AP environmental science, this is a great example of a tool that during the climate change segment of your year, an AP environmental science teacher could implement Flood Hub and have a conversation with the students about the potentially positive impacts of AI technology when it comes to climate change prediction. And that's not just flooding, it can be for fire prevention, it can be for tornado prevention. To me, the most exciting opportunities, and there are a lot of teachers and educators here talking about these today, are when individual educators, be it a computer science teacher, an elementary school teacher, an AP bio teacher, talk about projects that bring AI into the conversation but don't replace the ability of students to be creative and make arguments about whatever the learning objective is for the lesson.
And what advice would you give to educators who kind of want to start dipping their foot in, maybe are a little nervous? What should they do?
I think that's a very fair question. My recommendation is actually to start seeing how to use AI in your everyday life. I think that when you start to kind of see the benefits of it, outside of maybe the high stakes sentiments of your job, you can get more comfortable with it. And then naturally that will lead to sort of a boomerang effect of bringing it back in the classroom. I think one of my favorite things that I've started doing is, when I'm cooking, and I think this is true for a lot of educators, you come home, you're tired, you need to make dinner, you have some stuff in the refrigerator, but you're like, I don't know what to make. You put in the ingredients into a chat bot, you say, what are some recipes that I can get? And then up it comes. To me, that's actually a direct example of what you could potentially do in the classroom as well. You say, I have these materials. What's a great project that I could potentially teach students that also has the basis of educating them on the food web, for example? And so, as with all things, be kind to yourself. It takes time to get used to stuff. Also know that these technologies are never going to fix everything. They're just one part of the equation. And just start playing around with it. And doing it outside of your job may make it feel a little bit lower stakes and a little bit more palatable.
And lastly, AI is constantly changing. We don't really know what it's going to look like in the future.
Nope.
But, what gets you most excited about it when you look out to the future?
I mean, I think what makes me really, truly the most excited is the fact that the students that we are currently teaching are going to be the ones that design technology, that are the ones to think about what sorts of data sets to put into some of these technologies. It also does give me a little fear because I hope that we're able to achieve a place where every student has that opportunity to be able to be a part of that process if they so choose. But I think I'm just very excited about what the students of today are going to be doing in 20 years. And not just when it comes to artificial intelligence, but really the proliferation of computing technology in general, and also how they're going to use maybe some of what's around today to address the biggest issues. I mentioned climate change, but I think there's a lot of things that, frankly, I feel very optimistic that the students of our classrooms today will be able to, continue to iterate on and solve someday. So I have a lot of optimism.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us today and for being a thought leader in this work.
Thank you so much.